So the Cornwall Hill College in Pretoria has allegedly gone back on its promise for transformation. The school was in the spotlight following demonstrations by some parents in May. It's been accused of racism, lack of transformation and diversity. Let's bring in now one of the parents at the school, Sarah Mthintso, who joins us now via Zoom. Sarah, thank you so much for making time. So you had a meeting on Tuesday that was, among other things, meant to ratify the decision that was taken last year for the board of the school to include other races. What happened at that meeting?
Thank you, Clement. Yes, it was a very bizarre meeting. So first and foremost, there was a decision taken late last year in November at the AGM because as parents we pushed back from just appointing a strictly white board. So the AGM that followed, which was on Tuesday, was actually meant to ratify the inclusion of black directors onto the board, and it was rejected overwhelmingly by white parents.
Yeah, so...
And I guess the board as well.
Yeah, my understanding is there was a diversity and transformation committee that was set up by the school, and it was meant to guide the transformation journey, and it made a recommendation to extend that board from 16 to 20 members, which would then make it possible for the board to usher in at least about 4 new black directors. You are saying that the parents at the school overwhelmingly rejected this.
Yeah, so that decision was made last year to bring about inclusion through the introduction of 4 directors that would ordinarily be black directors for purposes of transformation. The Transformation Committee, to which I'm a member of, made that recommendation, which was approved by the board. That recommendation was to be ratified on Tuesday at the AGM. And quite strangely, building up to the AGM, there were quite a number of events that happened. So one, the principal of the school issued a communication which suggested that the members of the parents that are driving transformation were conniving with the media to bring the school's reputation into disrepute. But importantly, the so-called independent director of the board wrote a letter, an open letter, to the school, without directly saying do not vote, but purposely saying we need to make sure that we keep the school in a manner that does not compromise where we come from and where we want to be. We obviously stand for transformation. We want transformation to happen, but importantly, it must not happen in a manner that disrupts the school. And I guess there were also parents that were peddling misinformation across the school. There's a note that was peddled throughout the school that suggested that all the black directors that were recommended do not bring anything but corruption and maladministration. Even without making entry into the board, there were already those insinuations, and that was quite disturbing.
My goodness, it looks like you have a battle ahead of you. I mean, if you don't have the support of the other parents, then this is really going to be a difficult one. What does this vote mean then, Sarah? The board of the school then remains nearly, nearly 90% white?
Yeah, well, it means a couple of things. I mean, it basically says we are very opposed to transformation. So despite the fact that last year we made a commitment that we will go on and make sure that we kickstart the journey, the vote says no, we don't want transformation. But importantly, there was also an interesting dynamic that came out. So building up to the AGM, the entire community was given a set of financials. And in the financials, there were quite interesting things that came out. So 3 of the board members that are currently on the board, and I need to specifically say white board members, had either themselves or members of their families doing business with the school. So whether they have declared they followed process to us is not an issue, but we're very concerned with governance in the school, because essentially what it means is that those that have proximity to power are using and abusing their power to distribute amongst themselves contracts that obviously lead to personal gain. And that's an issue that we don't take very lightly, because if we are to be serious as a school about the fight against corruption, not just as a school, but as a country, we must not fall into a trap of labeling corruption only when it happens in a particular segment of society, but when it glares and stares at us, we don't look at it. So for us, that vote really said, we're not concerned about those shenanigans that are happening behind the scenes. We're not concerned about the children who are subjected to racism by the school. We're not concerned about the fact that there is a need for this school to elevate itself and put itself in a situation where it is diverse across the different structures of the school. So for us, it's very worrying, and it's something that we're not taking very lightly.
So what now? What are you guys going to do as concerned parents?
Look, the fight does not stop. We understood from the very beginning that the AGM is one of the milestones that we thought would bring a very positive outcome, but it doesn't mean that because we did not get the envisaged outcome, we stop. There are many levers that are available at our disposal that we will pull. South Africa is a very constitutional country with laws that seek to make sure that everybody is treated and treated fairly. So we will pull from the various authorities in society and in the state to intervene and help us deal with this challenge. And ultimately, I think what we really want to do is we really want to get to a position where this school does not necessarily poise as a school that only services a particular segment of society, but it really reflects itself as a school that's diverse and that protects every human being who's a member of that community.
Yeah. You know, I've often had people want to use this argument that, well, let's build our own as black people. Let's leave these institutions that are refusing to transform. And the problem that I often have with that is you can't leave institutions that refuse to transform in a democratic South Africa. So we need to fight the system. And even though it's going to take some of you to be, you know, facing these hurdles, but we need to fight the system because we live in a country that is non-racial. We live in a country where no institution must be allowed to continue operating and living when it still somehow celebrates the ideals of the past. How do you respond to people who often make that argument that, well, if you're not happy as Sarah, why don't you take your kids out of that school and take them to a predominantly black school?
Look, interestingly, we had a number of those comments coming through at the AGM. In fact, I needed to have mentioned that the design and the format of the AGM was also quite bizarre. Because an AGM is a platform from which members ought to engage with those that they have entrusted with the oversight role. On this particular occasion, the school opted to have a platform that mutes everybody. So we weren't able to speak. So if you wanted to raise your view, you needed to type on the chat. So they deactivated the voice integration system. So we weren't able to speak. So as we're interacting with the community, we had a number of particularly white parents who were very opposed to this journey, who were saying to us, if you want to leave, if you don't want to be a part of the status quo, then you need to pack your bags and go. And not only pack your bags and go, but go and align yourselves with those schools that work on a 30% basis as your minimum pass. So that was that. And I think for Cornwall, it's very sad. It is sad because Cornwall is set up as a school that is built post-apartheid. So it's a democratic school or built in a democratic era. And what you would then expect is that we would want to thrive, considering that we don't have a burden of history of oppression. But if you carry the history from the past and bring it into the present and want us to subject our children to that kind of environment, I think it is wrong. So we're not going anywhere. We're not going to pack our bags. We have invested in the school. We have paid debentures. We are paying the same amount of money that white parents are paying. And therefore, our fight is not really going to end with us leaving the school. We are going to change and we are going to challenge the institutional racism that is entrenched in a school that is not even supposed to be practicing these practices, considering its origins. Yeah,
I mean, just imagine what would have happened to this country if those that were fighting the apartheid system decided to pack up and leave without fighting the system. We wouldn't be here, right? What role do you think the education department can play, Sarah? I know the MEC was at the school the last time that you guys were protesting as parents, because I often think about the role government plays in forcing, because unfortunately that's where we are now. Some institutions need to be forced to transform, because if you leave it up to them, they don't do it. And we've seen it with the Labour Department constantly releasing the report on transformation. Institutions are still not transforming. So we're getting to a point where they have to be forced. Do you think government is doing enough to ensure that there is transformation and it's forced at these institutions?
Yes, I think so. And I think government has got the legislative power to enforce the change. And I say so because Cornwall as an institution is given a license to trade. And there are certain obligations and conditions that come with your ability to trade in South Africa, and especially if you are operating in a space where you are supposed to be delivering services, in this instance, education, on a non-discriminatory basis. And I think the government in various forms, whether it is the Department of Education, whether it is Umalusi, need to really, really think through what this situation presents to them. Because for me, as I sit as an ordinary parent who's fighting an institutionalized system, I think we need to really look at legislative power that our government has that will force this institution to really make sure that this place is not reserved for the very few. I mean, I talk about racism, I talk about poor governance, but also this is an institution where if you go in, you will realize that there is also nepotism. I mean, not even half, probably about 20-30% of the teachers in the school are related to one another. You've got a principal of the college whose wife is an accounting teacher. The sister to the wife is also teaching accounting. When you dismantle and speak about the layers of just a cabal of people who are out to not serve this particular community that they've isolated. I think if investigations is done, and we're very happy that the Human Rights Commission is coming in, because in my view, they are going to unravel a whole lot of things that are not correct in that environment.
All right, look, good luck to you and the other parents who are fighting for transformation at that school. Sarah Mthintso, I appreciate your time on the lead this afternoon. She's one of the parents at the Cornwall Hill College in Pretoria.